Hello and welcome to this, which is day 15 of the TooFatLardies Advent Calendar for 2024. I hope very much you've been enjoying the little snippets that Rich and Sid and myself have been slipping out over the last 2 weeks. And it's now just 10 days until we can all gather round the table and enjoy a Christmas feast. A feast that is, of course, the TooFatLardies Christmas Oddcast, which will be with you, we hope, for Christmas morning. So you can join us in a glass of mulled wine or Bucks Fizz or hot chocolate if you prefer. So it falls to me to open day 15 on the calendar. So let's see what's behind the window. Very pretty picture of a lighthouse for some reason. And it says on here, Nick, the name of the game. If you were to write a book on wargame design, what would the most important chapter be called? And what would you have to say in it? Nice one. Well, books can be quite inspirational. I'm sure many of us will have read Donald Featherstone's books, famous books on wargaming, or books by Charles Grant, perhaps, in our younger days. Books by Bruce Quarry, maybe, about wargaming and wargames rules. And even more recently, of course, our own fantastic and very great Henry Hyde, whose books, The Wargaming Compendium and Wargaming Campaigns, are thick enough to bend any bookshelf. If you haven't yet got a copy of those, well worth getting on to your local book supplier or to Amazon and getting a copy of Henry's wonderful books. Hello, Henry. Merry Christmas to you. So how would we, what would I do? Well, I would think that for me, the key aspect would be decision-making. So if I were to write a book on wargame design, I think the most important chapter would be titled Designing for Decisions or something like that. Because at its core, a wargame is about making meaningful decisions under pressure or under some other form of constraint, whether it's commanding armies or managing resources or navigating the fog of war. The choices that the players face are what makes the game engaging and mentally stimulating. This chapter would explore how to craft those decision points, balancing a bit of complexity with clarity to challenge players without actually overwhelming them with too many decisions. And this is quite a narrow bridge sometimes, I think, that games need to balance. So the foundation of this process for me lies in defining the role of the player. A wargame's success often hinges on who the players are within the game. What role do they take on? Are they the general? Are they the political strategist? Or are they the platoon or small section leader? The role they're in shapes the decisions that they make and therefore shapes the challenges that you as a game designer need to lay before them. The story the game tells and the depth of their engagement is all part of that. So effective design goes beyond assigning roles. It creates mechanisms that immerse players in the historical or fictional mindsets of their characters. Players should therefore grapple with the same information or lack of it that real commanders faced, and should be encouraged to make decisions rooted in historical doctrine, not with modern hindsight. This is, again, quite a tricky thing to do, but it's very important to get the right feel for the period. So these mechanisms can even differentiate factions, maybe guiding players to act in ways that reflect the strategic and cultural realities of the time, even if those cultural norms are different to the ones the players now hold. And of course, that will inevitably be the case. So every good wargame thrives on dilemma. Do you attack or do you defend? We give people a challenge through making those decisions, tempting them to go one way or the other. Do you focus on mobility or do you go for strength and power and attack through the middle? Do you spend your resources now or save them for later? If you've got saved chain of command points, do you spend them on option A or do you bank them for future use for option B? These trade-offs create tension, ensuring every decision has weight and consequence. But no wargame can be completely without uncertainty because no commander operates with perfect clarity. And this is a very important aspect of it. The battlefield is inherently unpredictable. And war games reflect this through mechanisms like hidden information, randomized events, and dynamic scenarios. Anything which makes the game too certain or too predictable, in my mind, tends to remove some of the mental challenge from the game and often loses some of the realism too. By emphasising some of the challenges, such as prioritising resources, navigating the fog of war, or managing imperfect coordination, war games capture the essence of command without getting bogged down into unnecessary detail. So we must somehow find the balance. Of course, to help us make decisions, it's useful to have a model, and one of my greatest influences in this area is the OODA loop. So the OODA loop, as many of you will know, stands for Observe, Orient, Decide and Act. It was created by an American fighter pilot who wanted to understand how it was that pilots in inferior planes could still outperform pilots in superior planes. That's, to paraphrase it hugely and rather unfairly, but this model of decision making fits seamlessly into wargaming and really good for mirroring the dynamic nature of real world operations. I've been very lucky enough in my academic and work career to study many models of decision making. And I keep coming back to the OODA loop as one that we can really apply smoothly to the wargaming process. We can use the OODA loop then. Players must observe. So first of all, they observe the unfolding situation that they see before them on the table with their limited information, maybe the information they get through their Kriegspiel umpire. They observe the information that's coming to them. They orient themselves by analysing the context, deciding what to do under the pressure of the game, and then they act whilst anticipating their opponent's move. The loop, of course, is iterative, constantly evolving as new decisions and outcomes emerge. And war games are really good at this. If we get the mechanisms right, we can allow players to take the initiative and get inside their opponent's OODA loop. And this is an important thing. It makes players feel under pressure and also allows players to turn the heat up on their opponent. It's really important that we do that. War games can elevate this and introduce new concepts alongside something like friction, for instance. Friction is something worthy of a chapter all on its own. But you cannot divorce friction from decision making. Decisions are made in an atmosphere filled with friction in the wargame sense. And what that means is, of course, complicated plans do not necessarily fit neatly against the chaos of the battlefield. A fantastic example of this, if you want to read more about it, is Spencer Fitzgibbon's book, which is entitled Not Mentioned in Dispatches, which tells the story of the Falklands Battle for Goose Green and examines in particular how friction influenced what happened when Colonel H. Jones applied his 6-phase battle plan to that action. So we want to try and have decisions and ensure that players still feel influential, but recognise that friction plays a part in how smoothly those commands are played out. Okay, so what else would be in this chapter? Well, another critical element of wargame design is the feedback that we get, and that, this is at the heart of decision-making loops. And I guess as wargames designers, the loop is design the game, see what happens, learn from what happens, and as players, we go through that same learning process. Games can be learning events, after all. So players need clear and good insights into the results of their decisions, so that they can then adapt and learn. They need to be able to have some kind of predictability of outcome that enables them to make the same decision next time, perhaps in a similar situation, and feel perhaps more confident in how their decision will play out. So the feedback loops not only clarify outcomes, but reinforce also the importance of each choice, keeping players immersed in the game. Striking the right balance between player control and historical realism, I guess, is key. And authenticity should enhance the narrative without sacrificing any playability. Playability is always king. But finally, of course, it's the iterative playtesting itself, which is the backbone of any good war game design. And we will often talk on the podcast about cycles and hours and depths of playtesting that we go through, and we are supported in this wonderfully by an excellent playtest group. And if you're in that playtest group, Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for all your hard work this year. Testing, the mechanisms of the game is so important. Playtests allow us to check the pace, check the engagement, and check the level to which we are challenging decisions for players. And we can get that blend, therefore, of decision-making versus a satisfying game experience. So listening to player feedback tells us what works and what doesn't, and where that experience can be improved. So a process to your playtesting is important. It's not just a case of chucking a set of rules out there and saying, what do you think? It's about using some structured feedback processes to ensure that you get the answers to the questions that really make the difference. So there you are. I guess ultimately decisions are the lifeblood of war games, and therefore this is the reason why this would be the key chapter in my book. The decisions we make drive the tension, they drive the challenge, and they ultimately drive the narrative that the players create through the game. So if we can master the art of designing meaningful choices and meaningful decision points within the game, war games creators can craft war games that are not only intellectually stimulating, but which are also great fun and a great way to spend time with your mates at any time of year, but especially at Christmas.